What's up, everybody? It's Roger and James here from the DisKingdom podcast, and we're going to start a brand new kind of mini sort of series ahead of Marvel Vs Capcom Infinite. We're going to call it the Road to Marvel Vs Capcom Infinite, where we're going to take a look at the Capcom side of the games, look at the series each week, kind of look back, and ideally as well, we're going to try and play some of these games because some of the characters and stuff we don't have any knowledge of. We're ahead of the game coming out. It'd be nice, I think, for maybe some Marvel fans that don't know who they are. Maybe this is a quick recap, but also just for our own selves. There are some series that I literally have no idea about, and so this is kind of, I thought this would be a nice kind of way of getting us warmed up for it as well. But we're going to start off with probably the easiest one for us all, with Street Fighter. Or Street Fighter 2, or Street Fighter 5, whichever one you do. Because it literally was all like, if we're going to start the series, let's start on the easiest one with the least amount of effort that we have to put in. Because I'm going to be honest, Street Fighter 2, that was my game as a kid. I was in the arcade and I put down so much money. I purchased Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition on my Sega Mega Drive. It cost me £65. And I'm thinking this was like, 25 years ago, I brought the it was my birthday, I brought the 6-button pad. I loved it. A Street Fighter, I then rebought it on the and I'm this close to rebuying it on the Switch. I'm just waiting for a price drop, because that's been very, very successful. Street Fighter 2, I went to see the movie at the cinema for my birthday one year. I had all the manga comics in a little box. So for me, Street Fighter is the most known of all the Capcom series. I love it. For me, Ryu, Ken, Zangief, these characters are just, I know them. So when I see them in the Marvel vs. Capcom trailers, I'm in. I'm just tick, done. You can put Ryu next to Spider-Man and he is equal for my childhood of how much time I spent with these characters.
Yeah, I have to say Street Fighter 2 definitely ate up a ton of my time as a growing young teenager type person. It was between that and Mortal Kombat, which was, of course, huge at the time as well. But Street Fighter 2 was, it was the game that my friends and I ended up having our own little mini tournaments on. The one that I remember, I think, was Street Fighter 2 Hyper Edition.
Yeah.
So it had Hyper in the name somewhere. Yeah. And that was the one that we played all the time. I used to play primarily with Vega. He won't be in this game, but he's the one I remember because he had the claw. I remember I liked him because he had the claws, and the claws reminded me of Wolverine. And then, of course, years and years later, Vega, as far as I know, has not been in any of the Marvel vs. Capcom games.
No, because I remember the Championship Edition had the 4 bosses brought in as playable characters, and then you had Super Street Fighter 2, and then they brought in another 4 characters, and they've kept tweaking on it since then. They're kind of sliding into this whole series kind of thing of not Street Fighter 1. No one really no one ever knew that one. It was always 2. But then we went into, I remember the PlayStation era where we had like the Marvel superheroes and kind of the early stages of Marvel vs. Capcom. So we were playing those games with my friends very early in the early stages, and like the PlayStation, I remember we were getting Street Fighter Alpha and stuff. And then I'm going to be honest, I think kind of as we went into PlayStation 2 zone, my sort of fighting zone kind of as a one-player game that kind of, I don't know, it just disappeared for a bit. Street Fighter 3, and I know like Tekken and Soul Calibur, those games started coming up, and I remember playing Soul Calibur on the play, and it was like it was a movement on from it. I remember like Virtual Fighter, that was so much more expensive to play, but my love of the series but it always goes back to Street Fighter 2, whereas really Street Fighter 4, Street Fighter 5 never quite kind of got me back in personally.
Yeah, I played Street Fighter Alpha maybe a couple of times. I played Street Fighter 3 maybe a couple of times. I played Marvel vs. Capcom, a handful of times, both the first one and the second one. But once Soul Calibur came out on the Dreamcast, I had a Dreamcast the first day I played Soul Calibur. That became my fighting game of choice up until probably Injustice, actually. I played Soul Calibur 1, 2, and 4. I skipped 3 for whatever reason. But, 4 had Yoda and Darth Vader in it, so that was huge.
I picked them up the other day. They were on like £3 each, kind of thing, just because I want to do a video on Yoda. But yeah, it definitely, like I say, I think I can see why with Marvel vs. Capcom pushing the Street Fighter aspect makes the most sense, and also it's the core of what Marvel vs. Capcom is about.
Yeah, and I mean, Street Fighter is the grandfather of Marvel vs. Capcom, so it makes sense for Ryu, Ken, Akuma, these guys to be in the game to represent the Capcom side. And when I think of Marvel vs. Capcom, Ryu and Ken and these guys are the first people I think of for Capcom.
Yeah.
I know there are a lot of people, we grew up with Mega Man, we grew up with, Ghouls and Ghosts and stuff like that. But in this context, my first thought always goes to the Street Fighter crew.
Yeah, I mean, as well as that thing as well of like, some of the merchandise coming up, with the Chun-Li and all the rest of it. These characters, I'm this close to ordering that unit because of the fact that the Street Fighter character is in it that I have that connection with. Whereas if they just chucked in someone from Darkstalkers or something, I don't know what that is. So therefore, I do think, even just the way they're marketing it with Ryu and Chun-Li, they know that that our age group have that connection with these characters that will draw that it backs it up.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of nostalgia for these characters. Now, I don't think that there's anybody who's going to get Marvel vs. Capcom on the strength of having the Street Fighter characters in there because, they just play Street Fighter V instead.
Yeah.
But they're a nice little bonus for the people who are maybe just getting it for the Marvel side, like people like me, who are really just there for the Marvel side. I could see on the Capcom roster, I'll play with Chun-Li and Ryu and Ken. These are guys who I'm familiar with. I know their fighting styles. I can Hadouken with the mediocre among them and all that stuff. But, once you get into like Frank West or whatever, I'm just kind of, okay,
I mean,
sure.
It's like, even just like this past week, some details came out about Capcom where the Switch version completely outdid their expectations. They sold just under 500,000 copies. And, there's a lot of people going, why did these people buy it? It was massively over expensive. But they are so happy that they're going to be doing some more ports and stuff. And they are, that was the litmus test to see if and I want to pick up Street Fighter. I literally had a look only yesterday of that thing of like, I'm just waiting for a sale. And it's for a game that come out this much later where they keep just tweaking it. It's still a top-selling game. 25 years odd later, Street Fighter 2 still is able to do that because the game works on such a fundamental level that even years later, it still works.
And it's such a weird thing, too, because we've been kind of trained to expect that from Street Fighter 2. Sure, you can joke all you want about all the millions of different versions that Street Fighter 2 had, but in a way, this is one of the key games that primed us for DLC, for that idea, we'll have Street Fighter 2, and then we'll also add the ability to play M. Bison, then we'll add in the ability to play as Vega and Sagat and all these guys, and they couldn't do it as DLC back in the day because the mechanism wasn't in place, and now they can, and we've seen what they've done with Street Fighter V as a result of that. But when they announced that there's a new version of Street Fighter 2, sure, we kind of roll our eyes and goes, oh, version 30 or whatever. But at the same time, we're kind of like, oh, okay, I'm actually kind of down with that.
Well, I remember as well. I remember spending that much on the Championship Edition, and then I remember buying Super Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo because it had the other 4 characters, and even it has that. And I feel like for me, the Marvel vs. Capcom series, the Street Fighter aspect to it is the one side of the Capcom. As I said, it works. They could do Street Fighter versus Marvel, and they did actually do that as a game. That did exist. It was, I think, it was Street Fighter versus X-Men or something like that.
Yeah,
I could be completely happy with an entire roster of 12. All the classic ones. Obviously, they've introduced more characters since. In Street, I've been so close to pick. There's been a few times that Street Fighter V has been discounted to the point of me wanting to pick it up, but I was a bit hesitant and stuff on it. But those moves of I'll jump into Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Marvel Capcom 3, and I was playing as Ryu because the fireballs and the Hodoukens, you just
Yeah.
it's like muscle memory for me, like to do that.
Yeah, I mean, Ryu is how I learned how to do a fireball. It's such a standard move in fighting games now that you don't even really think about it. It's just, normal. But at the time, these fight stick combinations were still new to many of us. I don't know if that was actually, the game that introduced them or if there were ones before, but that was the one for most of us where we
Yeah,
learned how to do a fireball, how we do a dragon uppercut,
yeah,
which is a very complicated move if you first time
yeah.
you're attempting it.
I remember actually buying the guidebook for the game where it had all the moves and how to do it, and they're trying to practice, and it just used to take. I mean, yeah, you put me in it's like the whole thing about the online play, and you get destroyed. I mean, there's a reason why esports, it's still played, because online and in the arcade, if you were good, yeah, in your arcade you might be all right depending on who you're in there with, or your brother or your friends. But online it changes it all. But I remember having the guidebook and trying to do it. But then even that, I remember with Mortal Kombat, you had all the book in the magazines where they had all the finishes, and you'd be like, oh,
And it was a huge deal if you used a character you weren't familiar with, because you'd kind of be like, oh wait, hold on a second, how do I do Guile's Sonic Boom? Oh, okay, how do I do that? And because you had to memorize all these moves, and it wasn't like today where you just hit the pause button and it's like, oh, okay, let's see.
Yeah.
Oh, X plus down.
You just Google, how do you were in that arcade, and half the time you just did it, you learned it by accident. You just did it, and obviously, and you would, there was no internet when this game came out, so you had to buy books. It was in magazines. I remember even having a little book that came on the front of a magazine of all the moves. They were selling that, and they just stick around your little guide to try and remind yourself. And I remember having little cheat books and stuff. But the Street Fighter series as a whole is definitely the strongest. Was why we decided to go first, because we knew we didn't have to do. I will be replaying it a little bit this week. You're going to see some gameplay footage during this video, because there is that aspect of, it's a good way for getting us all ready for Marvel vs. Capcom, because I feel like there are so many Marvel fans that do not know some of these characters.
Yeah, and I think, as you alluded to, the Street Fighter characters are probably not on that list so much. Most people are at least familiar with them. But as we get, farther down the list, maybe talking about Arthur from Ghouls and Ghosts and all that stuff, it's going to be a little more obscure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like there are certain games like Monster Hunter and Darkstalkers and Dead Rise, which I have got no knowledge of.
So I wouldn't I wouldn't refer to Monster Hunter as obscure, but it's not one that you and I know about.
No, but that is Monster Hunter is so more than Street Fighter in terms of sales, but it's easy if you do not get in on that, and you just sometimes franchises can completely pass people. I mean, how can you miss it? Well, if a game comes out on the exact same time or the same week as another title that you're already established with, you can leave it, or there is this thing of, Marvel side of the Marvel vs. Capcom is more mainstream. Gamora's on the big screen. Frank West isn't. So this is going to be interesting.
It is. I think when we get to Ghouls and Ghosts, we're going to have a competition to see who breaks their controller first. Because those games are.
Well, this is even like down the Street Fighter. I was like, oh, it's a shame I haven't got my Super Nintendo Classic already here, because it's got Street Fighter 2 on it. I mean, this is again, I've already brought it again. It's coming on. It's like, okay, it's got Ghouls. I think it's got Ghouls versus Goblins on that one as well. We were discussing actually on Discord this week that when I actually looked at the amount of games, there's a load of these Capcom games on like Xbox Gamer Pass and PlayStation Now. So for us, it's like, that's gonna be a good way for us to kind of play some of these games on the cheap kind of thing. But so things like that, it should be a little bit more fun. But we're gonna be doing one of them each week, probably right up till Marvel vs. Capcom comes out, maybe even a week or two after, depending on how many games we've kind of got to go through. But for me, I am actually like, no, I need, I'm not necessarily going to be like, right, well, I'll complete all 10 of the Resident Evil games or something like that. But I at least want to, when I am playing against these characters, I can kind of go, okay, I know who that is, rather than it being, no idea, no clue.
Yeah, if we choose to play like maybe the original Bionic Commando or something, maybe have save states so we can actually beat the game.
Yes, but again, Bionic Commando is actually one that I do remember as a kid. But we'll leave
I
that on for
have
that episode. But
I have a vague memory.
yeah. On that note, guys, let us know what you guys think of Street Fighter the series. Which one is your favorite? You know, what character do you like to use, etc. We'd love to know your thoughts on all of that below. Remember to check us out over at DisKingdom.com. This month we're going to be giving away a $20 sort of online credit for either PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox, Steam, etc. So you'll be able to find all the information over on the website as well. James, where can they find you?
You can find me heroiclegacy.com.
And on that, guys, thank you very much for watching. See you guys soon. Later.
Hadouken.
Hadouken! What's up, everybody? It's Roger and James here, founder of this gaming podcast, and we're going to start a brand new kind of mini sort of series ahead.